Beautiful. Hello, my name is Dr. Aurora Murphy, and this is my colleague.
Hi, Dr. Emily Edwards.
Beautiful. And we are going to talk to you today about our research project called Creating Materials for Transformative Language Development in the Field of Architecture. First thing we're going to do is show you a poster that talks about our research. Then we're going to show you two posters that we've made about this research and also a set of peer review criteria. So I am going to share with you a poster now about the research. So you can see here at the top, this is the name of our research project. You can see that it's an action research project guided by this question: how can we best support students with identified language needs to develop their oral presentation skills? The reason that we have done this research is to do with the importance of oral presentation skills. Now, of course, multimodal presentations are central to the teaching and learning within architecture. However, students often struggle with the linguistic demands of crits that they must do in the field of architecture. There is then a need to develop these language tools for students of architecture within the language for architecture to explore the use of practical language-based tools, especially for those students who have language needs. And these are the students that Emily and I work with, these students who have these extra language needs. Do you want to talk about the context of our study then, Emily?
Absolutely. Thanks, Aurora. So we work in a university where there's an institution-wide program to embed language within disciplines. So we're actually really lucky to work in this context because we can design discipline-specific materials for students, including those in architecture. And what happens in our institution is that when students come in, whether they're undergraduate or postgraduate students, is they do a language screening task, which identifies those students who are really at risk with low levels of academic English and discipline-specific language, so that we're able to invite them to come to compulsory language development tutorials, and they run alongside the subjects that students are doing in their first semester. And so we have a lot of autonomy actually as designers and teachers to create materials that really help students to deal with the demands of their discipline as well as the assessment tasks that they have to do. So as Aurora mentioned, the crit, or the critique presentation, or sometimes called review, is a key element of architecture study. And in studio subjects where students are working on projects, they have to do several critique presentations, several minutes long, linguistically demanding, stressful. Students get very nervous. And so we decided that since students are really focused on these crits and being able to have the confidence to do them well, we would design some materials to help them. So in our language development tutorials that we teach, we designed a set of posters across the different skills, but we're going to focus on presentation skills today, and also some criteria to help with the peer review activity. Should we take a look at those posters and activity first, Aurora?
Yes, let's have a look at the first poster, preparing for the crit. So here we've got the first poster that we created to work with our students. And you can see this one here, the step one with these key concepts. Do you want to talk us through this first poster here, Emily?
Sure. So we designed this poster because we found students were not prepared for their crits. What we observed over several years actually of attending their crit presentations was that students often prepared so well for the portfolio, for their models, for their designs that they put up on the wall to talk through, but they made no attempt to create the oral presentation that they would have to do and structure it and think about what they were going to say. So we wanted to help them with that. So we designed this simple 4-step process to help them through the process of planning for what they were going to say. So step one is to think about key concepts. So often tutors in their subjects would help them with this, but generally there'd be 3 concepts that students could focus on in a presentation. It's only quite short, up to 5 minutes long. So focusing on 3 key things they wanted to communicate was something that really helped students. Step 2 is to build vocabulary. We did a lot of work with students on building up a list of important architecture words and then using them in their presentations. And then writing down what you want to say, not as a full statement to read out, but as something to help with the thinking process. So we'd encourage students to write a statement, but then to reduce that down to some notes or just some bullet points to be able to then talk through in their actual crit. And step 4 was practice. So we told students you need to practice 2 to 3 times at a minimum to feel confident in your actual crit. And in our language development tutorials, we had plenty of time for practice.
I think this is this poster guiding students through doing their presentations, because as you're saying, Emily, that students are often so nervous about these crits that they focus on their models and everything else, and then their thoughts are all jumbled and they can't actually work through their crit in a systematic way. And you can see that on the second page of this, we've got these spaces. This is a very usable kind of poster that the students can actually write down. This is step 1, 2, and then these are the other notes, so that students can really use these posters in their work, in their presentation preparation as well. So this is the first one, preparing for the crit. Let's go to the other one, the second one here. I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment. So the next poster that we have is on introducing the design. Oh, here we go, introducing the design. So students have worked through the first one on preparing for their crit. Now they get this next one. And this is about how do they actually prepare for their design. I'm going to show it to you in full screen mode. Can you see it in full screen mode now?
Not yet. Oh, yes.
Beautiful. Yep. So you can see the whole beautiful poster here in the full screen, once again, broken down into these very usable kind of chunks. So let's go through these little usable little chunks that students are doing when they've started preparing for their crit, and then they actually need to introduce their architectural design. What did they do, Emily?
So we found that from our observations, again, that students often launched into a very technical description of their design without clearly introducing what it was that they had done and why. So we created this poster so that they could plan what to say for the very start of their presentation. We told them to imagine that you're talking to somebody who has no idea what you've done, which they often didn't think about that. So we said, look, you need to describe what is the design in really simple terms. What is your design? What does it include? Where is it located? And then why did you create this design? So they normally had a brief, but to summarize that brief and to say why the design was needed, and then how they responded to that design. So what is special or focused or responsive about this design is the next point. And that goes back to those 3 concepts. So we asked them to introduce your 3 concepts really clearly, to say why your design is special or unique or focused and responsive to the client brief. And then finally, we asked them if it was relevant to their presentation to talk about what inspired them. So this could be naming some of the architects or designers that they were inspired by, or mentioning something that they'd read or heard about, perhaps in a lecture or in a reading, to link to what they have been exploring in their practical design. So this depended on the context of the presentation, whether it was relevant or not, but we found it was useful for students to make that link between theory and practice in their presentations. And again, we have a second page, Aurora, don't we, for notes?
Yes, we do. And I think, yeah, it's so true what you're saying. This is what I always found as well, that students really forgot this first part here. What is the design? So breaking it into these little chunks here, often forgot what is design, this really high level, rather than launching straight into this very technical detail. What actually is it? Why did I create this design? What is special? And this is a, they can write in it. There you go, you can write in it there. And also this part here about what inspired me. I found that students often forgot about this part here, and students can just write it in and use it when they are creating their presentation. What we also found when students were doing this work there we go, I'll stop sharing, is we're talking about the language tools and how sometimes the language of architecture is kind of sidelined or not really made explicit. So then there's this other thing that when students are using these posters and when they're practicing in class, it's giving each other feedback. And they didn't sort of know how to give feedback or how to receive feedback. So we now have this set of criteria that guide students through a peer review activity so they can give their crits to each other, once again trying to get through those kind of nerves that prevent people from actually practicing their crits, getting up in class, practicing together. And you can see that this is a blog that Dr. Emily Edwards has written here. And here we go, actual criteria for reviewing each other's crit. Oh, there we go. And I can even zoom in. So here we go, criteria, and 6 criteria here that are in, that then students can work with yes, somewhat, or no. Would you like to take us through these, Emily?
Sure. So as Aurora, you said before, we've done the preparing for the crit, we've done the introducing your design. So students are really well prepared now to talk through and do a practice crit presentation. Doing peer review is an excellent skill for architecture students because they're constantly watching others. They should be giving feedback to each other on those crits. So it's a really useful skill for them to be able to do and to be analytical and critical when they're watching. In our classes, we really encourage them to be supportive. So to identify the strengths of a student's presentation, as well as point out some constructive feedback about what they could do to improve. And we found the more that we did this, the better the students were themselves at doing good presentations, but also at reviewing others. So these criteria, the 6 listed here, are not criteria that are included in their assessment tasks, but they're criteria that we have built up over the course of the language development tutorial. So we teach for 12 weeks, over the course of 12 weeks. And they're things that we point out to students and we then want to look for in their final practice of their crits before the actual crit. So number 1 is they've introduced what the design is. That goes back to the previous poster and why the design is needed. 3 is that they've explained what's focused and responsive about the design, those key concepts. And then 4 is a skill that we had to develop with students during all that time online through COVID, and also still now we teach online, is how they point out the parts of their design clearly. So how they interact between the different modes of the presentation, the oral mode and the design visual mode that they've got up on the board or on Zoom. 5 is about their voice, using a strong and clear voice to sound confident. And 6 is using a wide range of architecture vocabulary. So we often recommend it to students to have a list of those words they want to use in their presentation to look at, so they could make sure that they've used those new words that they've been studying. So we found this activity to be really useful, especially towards the end of the semester as students were preparing for their very final crits. Did you want to add anything about that, Aurora?
No, I think that, you know, doing this peer review, it's once again, it's making that language explicit. It's making that language explicit. It's also, like you were saying before, about the use of feedback and how important feedback is, that students would often get so overwhelmed by the crit process that they couldn't actually listen to the feedback that they were getting from their jurors. So by practicing it in class, supporting students what to give feedback on, and then being able to use this feedback to make it better.
Absolutely. Okay. So let's go and have a look at the findings from our research. So we use surveys and focus groups mainly, as well as a teacher's journal. And we found some really interesting and positive things.
You can see what some of the feedback is in this blue box here. In these speech bubbles, we've got some actual quotes from students from either focus group, or a survey. So the students said that they improved their presentation skills. The students said that they used these materials outside of class. 50% had already used these materials outside of our classes where we actually use them in class. And 50% of students intend to use these materials. So they were being used, they were being useful. Students said things like this one here, especially for the first crit, I was really nervous. So I did a practice here in front of everyone, and it was really helpful. That's a student from our focus group. Student from a survey said, I can speak with more confidence and I can prepare structured speeches with a purpose before I speak. I think this is really interesting, these terms, prepare, and this structure that the posters really take students through. Then this final quote that we've sort of spotlighted here is, I really like the presentation poster, because when I'm nervous, I can't organize my speaking steps, like which one I'll say first. So this is really good for organizing my speaking steps, making it explicit, dividing it into chunks, giving students the opportunity to practice in a supported environment. We are continuing this work and continuing this research. And you can see now I'm referring to this yellow on the right-hand side. So we are continuing to refine these posters, the presentation practice that we do in class, the peer review activity that we showed you the criteria on, and other kinds of materials to help students of architecture who have identified language needs to develop their oral presentation skills.
That's right, exactly. And as we said at the beginning, this is an action research study. So we've been through 3 cycles of research. We're just collecting data in the 4th cycle, with one cycle being 1 semester long. So it is an ongoing cyclical type of research, which we've really found very practical and systematic and useful for our own teaching and design. We've just shared there 2 QR codes at the bottom, which will take you to the 2 blog posts. So one that we showed you on the peer review activity, and another one on communication strategies, which includes one of those posters that we shared with you. So they're publicly available blog posts at our university that you're very welcome to go and have a look at. And we'd love to hear from you. So we've included our email addresses there. If you have any suggestions, feedback, comments, it would be great to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching our presentation.
Thank you very much. So yes, pause the video if you want to grab those QR codes, grab our email addresses. Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.